Hi there, it's Kevin with GatheringMagic.com here with this week's episode of the Rogues Alley. We are going back to, I think we played this, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? It was a Weapons Trainer deck, and I'm going to upgrade it as suggested in the comment section. There's some things that I think will make this deck a lot more powerful. One of them was adding black for the Scrapheap Scrounger. So that's the focal point of this week's episode, is to test how well Scrapheap Scrounger does in the metagame. I was going to go back to the tokens archetype, but after looking at the Grand Prix finishes, I think that it's a bad time to be playing the black-green tokens. I have been, in the past few weeks, I went back to the black-green tokens archetype, splashed in white for the Sigarda, and it made the difference between having a very, very tough matchup versus green-black Delirium into the most really, really lopsided matchups. I was losing. That was probably my best matchup around the board, was the green-black Delirium. But after looking at the finishes for this past 2 weeks, last week there was 2 Grand Prix, both being standard, and they were just completely dominated by the Aetherworks Marvel, the green-red. And that is still one of my worst matchups with green-black tokens, as the Emrakul is just too disruptive for the deck to deal with, and you have to just land that Sigarda. So I think I'm going to go back to an aggressive type strategy and incorporate those changes that people suggest in the sideboard. The first change was to add black for Scrapheap Scrounger. What this does is allows for a more consistent artifact, as well as it gives a great target to be hooked up with like a Captain's Claw. What I really like about this deck is after a board wipe, say from like an Aetherworks Marvel's Kozilek's Return, or there are even decks that run the Radiant Flames and other sweeper type based strategies that bring you back a Scrapheap Scrounger and then equipping it to a Captain's Claw, and then swinging is going to swing you for 4 damage, leaving back a 1/1 and a 3/2 that both are kind of like renewable resources. If at that point you then drop down a Weapons Trainer, that turn you're actually attacking in for an additional, so it's 6 damage, and that can be the difference if you've already got your opponent down quite low. That is going to be a lot of damage. One of the best things I've done is recur to Scrapheap Scrounger, and then played a Weapons Trainer and a kicked Bushwhacker. Then it gives everything is getting the Scrapheap Scrounger buff, or the Captain's Claw buff from the Weapons Trainer. The Captain's Claw ally will not get the Reckless Bushwhacker ability, but you're swinging for a phenomenal amount of damage at that point. It's to be 3 from the Reckless Bushwhacker, 4 from the Weapons Trainer. Or actually, the Reckless Bushwhacker will be 3, Weapons Trainer will be 4, and the Scrapheap Scrounger will be attacking for 5, and the Captain's Claw will be attacking for 2. So right there is just an obscene amount of damage on board. I think last week, or 2 weeks ago, we were running, or 3 weeks ago, whenever it was when we ran this last, we were running too many lands at 21. I've cut it down to 20 with less, since we are running the Concealed Courtyard. That means that our lands are consistently going to be coming into play, most likely untapped by turn 3, and we don't want to tap land. So Needle Spires is taking a little bit of a backseat. I think that I have to do that to be splashing for black. There are only 8 black sources, but black is actually not that necessary for this deck, just to recur the Scrapheap Scrounger. So you get value by itself, and then value if you do end up having a black source to recur the Scrapheap Scrounger. Another one was the Stitcher's Graft. Stitcher's Graft does seem very interesting in this deck, as it has synergy with the Stonehaven Outfitter. It is a way you can hook up like Stitcher's Grafts into the tokens, either from like a Servo Exhibition or a Pia Nalaar, and then you can then just sack them, untap them, sack them to at least draw a card. And it does have this little sack outlet. The equip 2 is a little bit costly. It's kind of hard. I mean, it feels like the Inventor's Goggles, but the upside is you're attacking in for more damage quicker than Inventor's Goggles. I still like the Inventor's Goggles in the sideboard, because I think it's one of the key cards that we want to put in versus the red-white vehicles, what I kind of call mirror type strategy, because it makes our cards bigger than theirs. Bonesaw is kind of worthless in that matchup, and I think Inventor's Goggles will come in for Bonesaws. And then the Stitcher's Grafts are actually still pretty good, because it gives us a defensive strategy that then can turn aggro quite fast. So don't know. I haven't tested the card yet. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, I've seen some strategies use Vigilance creatures with the Stitcher's Graft. Therefore, you just have a +3/+3 creature at all times. It does untap. or some other ways of untapping creatures. But in this deck, there's just not any way to do so. We're just going to lose those creatures, but at least draw a card off the Stonehaven Outfitter. So ways to give haste with this deck, like through the Reckless Bushwhacker, maybe that's not that bad of a plan, or even the Scrapheap Scrounger with the Stitcher's Graft, and then be able to recur the Scrapheap Scrounger. Doesn't seem like a bad idea either. So still going to run the Inspectors, the Toolcraft Exemplars, the Inventor's Apprentice, and the Stonehaven, the Weapons Trainers, Reckless Bushwhackers. I think these are all the more powerful cards in the deck. The Inspector gets you the clue that triggers off the Toolcraft Exemplar and the Inventor's Apprentice, plus draws you a card late game. The other additions, I'm going to try some Servo Exhibitions. Not too many, though, just 2. They have some good synergy with both the Weapon Trainer and the Reckless Bushwhacker. However, Scrapheap Scrounger off a Weapons Trainer is still attacking for 4, which is the same thing you're getting off a Servo Exhibition. So I think that Scrapheap Scrounger is just... you want to play probably one or the other in the 4 copies, and then the other one be kind of the auxiliary card. And I think in this case, Servo Exhibition is just not as good as the Scrapheap Scrounger. And just 1 Pia Nalaar, because our curve is at, we are running the more like 18 lands with a animated land in the Needle Spires acting as like a creature in this type deck. Yes, it can tap for mana, and if late game, it is hard to animate the Needle Spires. Good luck equipping anything at this point with the low mana count. But I'm saying that this is more of an 18 land because we can rely on 18 lands reliably coming into play untapped. So a 3 converted mana cost is actually a little bit taxing for this deck to hit on time. So it's just, we're just going to go down to 1 Pia Nalaar. The sideboard gets a lot better versus the Marvel because we are going to pack in 4 Selfless Spirits. The reason why these aren't in the main is they're not very good versus the Liliana. Our deck is quite resilient to Liliana. The only thing that dies to Liliana is going to be the Reckless Bushwhackers and the Toolcraft Exemplars. Everything is just going to get kind of nerfed for a turn with a -2, -0. So the Inspectors and the Inventor's Apprentice still stay alive. The Stonehaven Outfitters stay alive. The tokens do die from both the Captain's Claws and the Servo Exhibitions, but that's perfectly acceptable. Those cards will probably come out, or what you do is you just wait for like the Reckless Bushwhacker Servo draw that then they can kill off the Liliana. The sideboard, we need a way to deal with Kalitas or Kalitas, so we do have the Harness Lightnings and the Galvanic Bombardments. Right now I am still liking anything just instant speed. I wasn't liking sorcery speed in this deck because I don't want to tap out. Like, if I do want to run removal, I want it to be instant speed. So Declaration in Stone is awkward. Stasis Snare is awkward with the double white. It's actually pretty difficult to cast a double anything in this deck, as we are into 3 colors at this point. So both Declaration in Stone and the Stasis Snare didn't seem to work out very well against the field. I can understand Declaration in Stone for particularly Cletus, but other than that, I think the Harness Lightning can actually kill it quite easy with the hub. It does add the 4 mana right there, and so you do have some outs in that aspect. I think that if you end up going against it, you want to just race it. I don't think there's a good game plan for the Cletus. It's if they draw it, they draw it, and you usually want to just try to push through. There have been games too that even with the lifelink and the blockading creature with the Cletus, I have been able to just flat out just push through it. Thalia gets kind of interesting versus both Mindwreck Demon and Ishkanah, and I usually do bring in Thalia versus that matchup for the Green-Black Delirium, as then they come into play tapped, and then you can kill them on the following turn. This whole column here is mainly, I bring it in versus the Red-White vehicles. You turn into more of a, I say more of you want to interact with their cards because they do have some pretty broken cards you need to take care of, especially like the Copters. So Inventor's Goggles will get you above their Galvanic Bombardments on most of your cards and protect your Toolcraft Exemplar, which ends up being a pretty good powerhouse. Oftentimes I'll go first turn Inventor's Goggles into second turn Exemplar, just so I can have the 2/3, and then it will end up attacking in for 4 damage on the following turn. I think that you just have to kind of play, the board state gets kind of stalled with the vehicles, and they have the advantage with progressing their board better, but we have the advantage of having that one explosive turn. So I can catch a lot of red-white vehicles decks kind of off guard when they end up trying to go more aggressive than us, and then we on one turn just kind of switch gears and take them out. So that still ends up being one of the more difficult matchups. It doesn't pair up the greatest versus red-white. Blue-white Flash is pretty decent. I bring in Bombardments and Harness Lightnings for that matchup as well. You need to take care of their early blocking things like the Reflector Mages and whatnot, and then you end up pushing through quite well. There isn't really any bad cards versus that matchup. Sometimes just the early pressure can make it so they can't cast the Reflector Mages in their safely cast them. The Reflector Mages slash the Spell Quellers, and then you can just push through. That didn't seem to be too much of a difficult matchup. Again, we'll test this and see how well they do. And so this is really tuned for the Marvel matchup. So I want to see some Marvel. So I'm probably just going to do some 2-man queues and try to get some Marvel matchups. Or maybe we'll put it into competitive, see if we can go against that matchup. And if I suspect if everything goes as planned, I think that the later game decks like the Aetherworks Marvel are just going to get overrun before they can deal with it. So again, I appreciate the suggestions. The suggestions in the last comment section or just some emails to me really built this deck. I think it's going to have some good play and a better performance than the last time we built the archetype. Anyway, this has been Kevin with GatheringMagic.com. Thanks for watching.